welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday interview sessions. Garland Vance, welcome, my friend.
So glad to be here, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. Love to know a little bit more about you. Tell us a little bit more about who you are and a little bit about your story.
Sure. So Garland Vance, I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, and in the United States, and have the opportunity to run my own business. It's a leadership consulting business where we focus on purpose, productivity, and peace for leaders, and get to run that with actually my wife and my kids help run it. So I have a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 10-year-old, and we're all kind of involved in the business together. And so really enjoying life.
I love that. That's so cool. Talk to me, because I can see just over your shoulder there, I have this copy of your book here, Getting Unbusy, 5 Steps to Kill Busyness and Live with Purpose, Productivity, and Peace. Before we dive into the book and the 5 steps, I want to know why even write this book. Tell me a little bit about the story and the background of why this book came to be.
Sure. So back in 2013, I started having all of these physical problems. I've always been kind of a high achiever, type A personality, and I started having all of these physical problems. And so I went to the doctor and said, what's going on? I've got chronic migraine headaches and extreme fatigue and forgetfulness, and I'm having heart palpitations. What's going on? And the doctor said, well, Garland, tell me a little bit about your life. And I said, oh, it's a good life. It's just really busy. And it was the same thing that I had heard hundreds and hundreds of other people say, whether they were college students or CEOs or stay-at-home parents. I just kept hearing over and over, I'm good, I'm just really busy. And I said the same thing, I'm good, I'm just busy. And he said, well, tell me what busy means. And so I started telling him about the 50 to 60 hour work weeks where I was working with a nonprofit at the time. I started telling them about getting my doctorate in leadership and spending 10 to 20 hours a week doing that, and having 3 kids at home, and then being involved a little bit in the community, and having people over to our house multiple times per week, and late nights and early mornings, and helping our church get new programs started. And so I told them about all those things, and I said, so like I said, I'm doing well, I'm just really busy. And Ryan, that's when my doctor, as you read in the book, my doctor put his hand on my shoulder. He looked me in the eye and he said, Garland, I am concerned for your life, because if you don't kill busyness, it's going to kill you. And it was a huge wake up call for me, but it was also a huge wake up call for our society really in general, because busyness is something that all of us brag about. We talk about it. We aspire to it. If you see a friend at a coffee shop and ask how they're doing, they're going to tell you, oh, I'm good, I'm just so busy. And I began to question some of the assumptions of, is busyness as good as we think it is? Is it something to aspire to? What is it actually doing to us physically, mentally, emotionally, relationally, productively? And as I dug into the research, it became really clear that busyness is kind of like the smoking of our generation. It's something that, smoking was something that everybody used to do. And then all these studies started coming out on how bad it was for us. And we're doing the same thing to ourselves. We're bragging about busyness and sucking in that addiction to busyness, and yet it's killing us. And so why write a book about it? Because I'm concerned for other people's lives as well.
Yeah, I heard recently, if the devil can't make us bad, he'll make us busy.
Exactly. Yeah. Keeps us so distracted. Great quote.
Yeah, and this isn't a question, but I'd like to share a bit that I really liked, and it's quite simple. It says, purpose is knowing your why, productivity is doing your why, and peace is about resting in your why, knowing that I can do anything I want, but I can't do it all at once. And I really liked that section of the book, because I can really resonate to your story in terms of, if you're service orientated and you're a giver, it's just that, I am not very good at saying no. And I find myself drawn into leadership positions where I just happen to take on more responsibility wherever I go. I've got ideas around how things could be better than yesterday, And just hearing you speak about your life, there was so much that I could resonate with in the last sort of 12 months for me. And yeah, just thank you for sharing that. And I think the one way that that can kind of manifest then is trying to do everything is this word and phrase of burnout. What's your perspective on burnout, and what can we do as leaders or as people in general to recognize first and foremost the signs of burnout?
Yeah. Yeah. So burnout has become a really popular topic. And right as the book was being published last year, the World Health Organization actually came out and said workplace burnout is an actual medical condition that is doing significant damage to the workforce. And then, COVID hits and this global pandemic hits. And I think for a lot of people, they expected burnout to begin to diminish. But what's actually happened is work from home and longer work hours, less boundaries. So burnout has actually begun to increase in the last few months. So burnout essentially has three stages that you go through. So the first is what's known as emotional exhaustion. And emotional exhaustion is kind of when you just look at yourself and you just, I just don't have it. I don't have any energy left. I'm tired. I'm fatigued. I can't do it anymore. So that's the first stage. And then your second stage is what's known as depersonalization. And that's when you actually begin to actively dislike the people who you care about the most. So you dislike your team members, you dislike your children because you just don't have any emotional capacity to give to them. And then the final stage of burnout is what's known as the loss of personal accomplishment. And in this stage, you really begin to look at your life, and no matter what you do, no matter, how many goals you accomplish, how far you push, you just look at your life and you're like, it's meaningless. I'm not doing anything. I'm just not getting anything done. And you really feel pretty much like a colossal failure. And there's this massive connection in the research between busyness, what I call an overcommitment to too many good commitments, and burnout. So busyness and burnout are very strongly related to each other. So when we have so many things to do, too many projects at home, too many projects at work, too many things that we've said yes to, then there is a high likelihood that busyness is going to result in at least one of those three stages of burnout, if not more. So huge correlation between those two.
Earlier this year, I left policing, and in the book, you talk about in the organizational context of busyness, and you talk about busy cultures get busier, and sometimes those busy cultures have fear-based cultures, and those were two things that I really resonated with being at the police. Was just there was this incessant drive and for continuous improvement to the point it just became, I wouldn't say toxic, but it was definitely unhealthy. I mean, I love improving things as good as anybody, but it was intense. And secondly, because I was responsible for people, I would try and challenge back upwards and say, look, we're at max capacity. We need to either stop, change prioritization. And what was said back to me was that if you keep pushing back, you're going to come across like a problem. And it was at that point, I was just like, I can't win. Like, I am just cannon fodder. I'm either going to burn my team out or I'm going to become a problem. And I don't want to be either, and I just, it really resonated with me, seeing that. And what are some of the ways in which leaders can then do the opposite and create healthier, cultures?
So I think I work with a lot of organizations and teams, and I think for many leaders, the biggest challenge is saying no to their own drive to be better. And I'm in full agreement with you. I wouldn't ask to be on the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast if I didn't believe in being always better than yesterday. But sometimes we have so many ways that we want our organization and our teams to be better that we expect to get them all done yesterday. And then, we're in this catch-up culture, which is just hurry, worry, and scurry. So I think leaders first need to learn how to say no to their own drive, not completely, but just to say, here's the 10 things that I wish could be better, but here's the one that if we focus in on it for 3 months or 6 months, will make everything around us better. And will lift the lid on everything. So being able to say that. And then the second is doing really the opposite of what you did, not what you did, of what you were told. And that's giving people the power to say, we're at capacity right now. And if we continue to add more, there's going to be significant problems. For most people, the organizational mentality is we should get 110% out of people. But the reality is for most people, 80% capacity is about max, because there's going to be interruptions and emergencies that fill up that remaining 20%. So for organizational leaders, a lot of times they really have to look at their people and go, okay, what does 80% capacity look like? Because that's going to actually get us to 100% capacity.
One of the things I picked up in your book was this default to no and defend your yes. What does that mean?
Yeah, so that's actually become, I think, one of the most popular topics in Getting Unbusy. So busy people default to yes and defend to no. And that means they default to yes. When somebody asks them to do something, they automatically say yes without even thinking about it. It's just like, will you do this? Yes. And then their brain kicks in and they're like, oh, I should have slowed down a little bit. So busy people default to yes. And then if they can't do something, they start defending their no. Well, I can't do it because I have a commitment already at that time, or I'm just really busy. Well, as soon as you start defending your no, somebody can come in there and start shooting down those defenses to finally wear you down to where you say, okay, I'll do it. What highly productive but unbusy people do is they flip it and they default to no. That becomes their automatic response, even to themselves. I could do this. No, I'm not going to do that. Or somebody comes and says, hey, I've got another project. Could you take that on? No, I'm probably not going to do that. And even if they're not saying it, that's kind of what they're thinking is, no, I'm not going to do that. And then they begin defending their yes. If they say yes, it's because they've thought about it. They've taken time to consider it. In fact, a lot of times I'll say, hey, give me 24 hours to think about that, and then I'll get back to you. They're careful with it, and they think about the ramifications. There's no project that you take on that doesn't have this ripple effect to it. I started we have a deck on our the back of our house, and my dad and I started doing some deconstruction of a few boards. And I said to him, hey, this is probably going to take 2 hours. Well, 6 hours later, we're still working on it. And it's finally at that point that I was like, I need to default to no at this point. I got to call somebody who actually knows what they're doing. But between the trips to the store and all the things that we didn't know how to do, it took 3 times longer than we expected it. So you really got to think in terms of, how do I think through the yes before I say yes?
I've really started to practice default to no and defend your yes. Unfortunately for my wife, I'm more confident at doing that at home.
Yeah.
I just need to practice that more in the real world. But you talked a minute ago about hurry, worry, and scurry. I love that imagery. Bring that to life for us.
Sure. So I call this the busyness vortex, and it's really the clearest sign that you're stuck in busyness. So hurry is when our bodies begin to move really fast. We walk fast, we talk fast. And what we're trying to do is get as much done in as little time as possible. So we start driving fast and, just everything fast, 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 fast. So that's hurry. But hurry actually leads to us having higher amounts of worry. So the faster we go, the more likely it is that fear is going to kick in and that we're going to start becoming nervous and worrisome about not getting everything done. And so we begin to worry. And then as we begin to worry, it causes our mind to go back and forth. So instead of being focused on the thing that's right in front of us, we're jumping back and forth between the 100 things that are in our mind. And I call that scurry. That's when your mind is like a little mouse and just kind of scurrying all over the place. And what hurry, worry, and scurry do is they increase each other. If I allow one into my life, it's going to allow the others into my life. And all of that sucks us in to busyness, because we don't have the mental and the emotional capacity to say no, to default to no, to defend our yes, to do quality work. And so we end up having to do things over and over and over again, which makes us busier. So yeah, busyness vortex that really sucks you in. And the biggest characteristic, or the biggest way to know if you're busy, is to look at your hurry, worry, and scurry.
Love that. So your doctor says to you, if you don't kill your busyness, it will kill you. And then in this book, you've created 5 steps to kill busyness. Talk us through that framework, those 5 steps.
Sure. So, a little bit of background to this. As I was doing my doctoral research on this topic, I kept coming across all of these books that would say, busyness is bad. You should stop it. And that was where it ended. They didn't actually give
advice.
a framework. Right. I appreciate that. Right. And so for me, I knew that I needed to create a framework for my own life to be able to move from this chaos to purpose, productivity, and peace. But I also wanted to create a framework for other people. And so what I discovered in all of the research and the books and the implementing, in my own life and starting to work with other people was, there are 5 steps. And so the first is you have to decide to get unbusy. And the second is you begin to deconstruct some inhibiting beliefs and bad habits and unwanted commitments that keep sucking you in to busyness. So there's this deconstruction phase that you go through. Then the third step is you decide what's the pace, not decide, you design the pace and the space that you want to live in. And you design your life around what I call the core 4, which are the 4 best practices of highly productive, unbusy people. And that's, they build time for relationships, recreation, rest, and reflection. So once you've designed that life, then you move into step 4, which is develop. And so develop is when you actually begin to put that design into your calendar and put it into your habits and even into your mind. You've really got to shape your mind. And then finally, the 5th step is you draw others in. It's all about getting your family and your friends and your coworkers involved in an unbusy life, because nobody wants to live an unbusy life where they're completely isolated from everybody else who's busy. This is about relationships and about priorities, what's most important in your life. And that's what happens when people get unbusy, is they get more and more time for their big dreams and their high priorities.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for taking us through that. And I know that through seeing some of your LinkedIn profile, you've been heavily active within the church as well, and using your leadership expertise to support and develop leaders within the church. How present and prevalent was Sabbath during your time? I know it's something you talk about in the book. I'm just curious to look at some of the practices that maybe you had to kind of reflect on and prioritize.
Yeah, so Sabbath so I spent 15 years in the nonprofit world, but it was the Christian nonprofit world. And then a few more years after that, working directly in a church. And for me, Sabbath, which is, a 24-hour period of doing no work. And what is work? It's anything you don't enjoy doing. Okay. Anything you don't, that's how I describe it. So I hate checking email. So I don't check email on Sabbath. I hate mowing the lawn. I don't mow the lawn on the Sabbath. But when I started working in a church, everybody else's Sabbath was my work day. And so my family had to create some new rhythms. And we've actually kept a lot of these rhythms even in starting our own business. So Fridays became Sabbath. For us, and my kids would go to school. My wife and I would have a date that day, and then our kids would come home and we would rest and relax. And then Saturday and Sunday became days that we did work around the home and work in the church. And we've actually maintained that rhythm even in starting our own business. I take most Fridays off as my Sabbath. and then tend to work on a little bit on Saturdays and a little bit on Sundays. But Fridays are my main day where I rest and rejuvenate and just step away from all kinds of work.
I love that. What were some of the other things that you discovered in your own process of getting unbusy?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I discovered is, there's a big emphasis right now on morning routines, and the way that you start your day is really, really important. And the tendency of most writing that I see is almost like you should wake up and immediately start doing work, and just get really productive as soon as you possibly can. But for me, I'm a morning person, but I discovered that the way I start my day affects the entire rest of the day. So I chose, and still do, to begin my mornings first with peace and getting my mind and my heart to a place of contentment and joy. And once that happens, then I'm ready to go into the productive part of the day. And my mind is a lot clearer, and I actually accomplish a whole lot more in a lot less time because I don't have the hurry, worry, scurry vortex that's going on. I'm at a place of peace. So that was one of the big ahas is, your morning isn't about, your morning routine isn't about productivity. It's first about peace.
I love that because I've never been I've never been actively encouraging others to have a morning routine that is fixed,
Right.
miracle morning that and I like what you said about it being a buffet. What do you mean by it's like a morning buffet?
Yes. So I am not disciplined enough to have a fixed morning routine in which I do the same things over and over and over again. So what I did is I started to create this buffet, and this is what I really encourage people to do. And a buffet means you pick 5 to 10 activities that bring you peace, that you love to do. And then when you wake up in the morning, depending on how much time you have and how you're feeling, those you pick and choose from the buffet. So my buffet is, if I won't tell you all of them, but, let's say I've got 4 or 5 things on the buffet. So there's going to be prayer, there's going to be reading that goes on there, mindfulness or meditation, journaling, those are some of those. Well, if I wake up and I've only got 5 minutes to spare, I'm not going to be able to do all of those. But I can pray, or I can have a mindfulness experience for a few minutes that helps me calm down. Or if I wake up really early and I've got a couple of hours before I need to get going, then my buffet can expand and I can enjoy a lot more of those. So for most people, what I've found is they put so much pressure on themselves to do this very precise morning routine, and it just drains the life and the enjoyment out of the experience. So build a buffet and then pick your buffet every day.
And it's always going to be accompanied with a good coffee, right?
Always a good coffee.
I love that. One of the things you said about in the reflection, creating time for reflection, but in the book you used this word that I really liked, and it was reflect and preflect. Tell me what the latter means.
Yes. So preflection is about looking forward. I think a lot of times, especially for leaders and for people who are highly driven, we downplay the importance of reflecting, of looking back. But no matter what team, if you look at great teams, if you look at great organizations, they're always looking back so they can learn from their successes and their failures, and they can make changes. So I put those two together because reflection is really about looking back to say, what did I do well? What did I not do well? What am I grateful for? What would I do differently? And preflection is then the planning process where you take that knowledge and say, okay, in the next week, in the next month, in the next quarter, what am I going to do differently? And how am I going to arrange my life and my time so that I can accomplish the things that are most important to me?
Yeah, Love that. You used the phrase squirrel brain. I mean, I love a squirrel. Like, I've often said that a squirrel is my spirit animal because I've never seen a sad squirrel. They always look happy. But what did you mean by using that phrase, squirrel brain?
Yeah, so there's this movie, a Disney movie called Up, and my kids are a little bit older now, but when Up came out, my kids watched it, I swear, hundreds of times.
Mm.
But there's these dogs who are in the movie, and what always gets them distracted is they think they see a squirrel. So they're on a mission, and then they'll go squirrel, and they crash a plane, or squirrel, 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 and that's what distracts them so often from doing what their master's mission is. And I think for so many of us, because of this hurry, worry, and scurry, we've got this squirrel brain where we're constantly chasing distractions that seem really important in the moment, but that actually take us off course from what really is most important to us. And so squirrel brain is trying to say, hey, there's a way that you can actually tame your mind a little bit when you begin to write things down. When you have an idea, you don't need to act on it right there. Just write it down and then process it a little bit later, and learn to get control of your mind and to unbusy your mind. And you're actually going to unbusy your entire life.
Yeah. You and I both share this idea that when leaders get better, kind of we all get better, whether that be in our families, our communities, our teams. If and there are leaders listening to this right now, what is the best thing that they could do as a call to action as a result of listening to this conversation between you and I?
Yeah. Well, the best thing they could do is buy the book, hire me to come into their organization, all of those things. That's yes. Shameless plug. No, I tell you what, if I actually think the best thing that people can do is go to gettinunbusybook.com, and you can take an assessment there that is the 20 best practices of highly productive, unbusy people. And it just scores you on how busy you are. And it will show you, are you, what I would call a busyness addict? And if you're a leader and you're a busyness addict, you're making your entire team and your entire organization busyness addicts as well. Or are you overwhelmed, or, so it takes you on the spectrum of where you can be. But I really think that's a lot of times the best thing that a leader can do, so they can see themselves compared to the best practices of highly productive, unbusy people.
Yeah. And here's the thing, there's no shame in taking that, because I've been quite open through this. I was there, and there are still tendencies. I guess being a high performer, sometimes when you love your work, and sometimes our work is never done. If you work with purpose and a mission, sometimes that work is never done. So being able to pick up the book and learn some good strategies and practices is going to help keep off the burnout, keep showing up on the longer term. So absolutely go and get Garland's book. How can people connect with you? How can they find out more about what you do?
Yeah, so feel free to email me. You can reach me at garland@advanceleadership.live. So Advance doesn't have a D on it. My last name is Vance, so Advanced Leadership. I'd love to hear from you if you want to email me, or you can go to our website, advanceleadership.live, to find out some of our offerings, and just to see some of the things that we're posting pretty regularly about busyness and burnout and productivity. I think those are great ways to get in contact with us.
Love that. My ethos is about helping people be better than yesterday. I'm curious to know what that phrase means to you.
Yeah, I love this question. And so I would say being always better than yesterday is about incremental improvement. And for me, it's really about a word that I love, and it's stewardship. And I think a lot of times people think that stewardship is all about money, right? You should steward your money. But the roots of stewardship actually means to draw out hidden potential in something. And to me, I am a steward of myself first and foremost. And I want to draw out whatever hidden potential is in me, which means I'm going to be always better than yesterday.
I love that. I love that. Great answer. Thank you for your time, your energy, your story, your book. And I'd just love for you to leave us with a final thought from your good self.
Yeah, well, Ryan, first, thanks for having me here. It is such a treat to spend time with you. I would say that especially for those leaders who are listening, it's actually possible for you, your team, and your organization to accomplish so much more when you learn to do much less. It gives you greater focus. It maximizes your time and your energy. So a lot of times I hear leaders and they'll say, I can't tell my people to be less busy. We've got too much to do. And the reality is you can actually accomplish so much more when you begin to do less as an individual and as an organization.
I love that. Be sure to go check out Garland and his website to find out how you can do more, do less. You said it far better than I. And on that note, much love. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much.